Hi and welcome everyone to the session. My name is Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Commons. Commons is a software tool to analyze qualitative research data and build research repository. And I'm super happy that we have Kayla Svoboda with us today from Freeletics. Freeletics is one of the most popular fitness apps in the world. And the research team of Freeletics went through a very interesting journey on how they built up research, and they did it in a very particular way, and then using collaboration a lot. So Kayla is here to tell us more about the reasons they went this way, the challenges they have, and the solutions. So we're very excited to get this inside view, and thank you for being here, Kayla.
Happy to be here.
Before we start on organizational topics, so we'll take the first 30 minutes or so of this session for interview, and we'll open up for questions after that. When we open up for the Q&A, I'm free to join with your video, and we can make this more interactive session, and you can ask the questions to Kayla directly. If you have any questions up front that you won't forget about, just post into the chat, and then we'll make sure to put them later. And after the session, at around 5:15 European time, I'll do a short demo of Commons. In the exhibition space, we'll touch on some of the topics we may talk about in this session, and I'll particularly focus on how Commons can be used as a collaborative tool for research and analysis. So if you want to learn more about that, you can follow me to the exhibition space later on. And with that having said, we're eager to learn more from you and your journey, Kayla. So before we dive into the situation at Freeletics, maybe tell us a bit about your personal career path and what led you to your current role.
Sure. So I'm one of those researchers who transitioned from academic research, to the world of UX research. This happened a few years ago. So I had been doing a lot of interdisciplinary social sciences research at big research universities, institutes globally. And then I discovered the world of UX research and haven't really looked back. Started working with a fintech in Brazil, designing a mobile banking app for unbanked favela communities. And now I've been at Freeletics for over a year and a half now. Around the beginning of 2019, I started and have been able to grow the research function within the company. So Freeletics, we offer this digital coaching app. So basically an algorithm that adapts to your feedback as you're doing body weight training at home.
Nice. And give us some idea of what was the situation at Freeletics like when you joined, like especially how was the company organized, and also in terms of UX research.
Yeah, so Freeletics still has this kind of startup position or vibe, and when I joined, the research function was still very new or young. So the research team, which is part of the UX team, the bigger UX team, started at the beginning of 2019. There was a part-time research manager who has really worked to grow the team and grow our role in the company, and myself as a full-time researcher. So for a lot of 2019, it was the two of us doing research across this whole company of 150 plus people, both product engineering side and sometimes marketing side as well. Sometimes with support from working students and interns, but really a small research team to try to conduct research across the whole company.
Sounds like a busy activity.
Yeah.
So how was research done before that? Or was there any research done at all?
Yeah, so there had been one researcher at the company company before, and there had also been a working student before, but no kind of official function established. We had a head of design, which became head of UX, which then became director of products, but he introduced usertesting.com to our designers. So they were doing a lot of usability testing. So once they already had a full prototype, they got into a habit of running a test before launching, checking for usability issues. And so the designers were quite proactive or comfortable with that, but not necessarily with a lot of the other research methods that we introduced later.
Yeah, okay. Understand. And all right, and then when we started to set up the research team as a team of two, and I already disclosed that in some way. So you value collaboration a lot in research at Freeletics, and in particular you have to build up in research. So maybe tell us why that is. What exactly is it that you value about it?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, collaboration is part of like the Freeletics work culture. We're kind of always, doing these claps. It's all about teamwork, working together. It's a really kind of open, cross-functional type of environment. But also in terms of building up this research function, it was really a matter of necessity. I mean, there's a really high demand for research in general, and lots of questions, in the company. And as two people, you need allies to work with you in order to be able to answer all these questions. So our main role in this early part of establishing the research function was to empower other stakeholders and teams to be able to conduct their own research. So we did a lot of trainings, a lot of kind of, a bit of hand-holding, quality assurance type of stuff, but really trying to get other teams to the point where they could conduct a lot of their own research, and then just kind of run things by us as well.
Okay. So is it fair to say that it really emerged from this mismatch of supply and demand, so to say, in research?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we also had to do some evangelizing as well, right? Because there was definitely a bias towards quantitative research and big data. There was already a data team established for quite a while. So having this user research team come on and start to conduct these qualitative methods was something new and less familiar to a lot of our key stakeholders. So we did have to kind of evangelize that as well. But I think people at Freeletics are very curious about our users and very receptive to information and clues we can give them about our users. So fairly quickly they started to see the value in this research, and so then yes, the requests start rolling in pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you have to go back to stuff. When you started this team, you mentioned that there was maybe some sort of skepticism or something, or not even with sure of the value of that. How did you handle it, and how did you evangelize and research? You have some tips or some steps that you took?
Yeah, I mean, this whole interview is about the condensed pool, right? But it really has been integral for us in kind of starting to do a lot more qualitative interviews. So kind of our first step to get beyond just usability testing is to try as often as we can to talk to our users, whether like our current users or potential customers, but to really start to talk to them. This, we could still do this in user testing, just doing a live session and an interview, but we found that our stakeholders, the designers, the PMs, a lot of them were quite nervous. We're really afraid to start, talking to and conducting an interview with a user. So we did do a lot of training about like listening deeply and getting teams set up and creating a lot of structure and like a formula around conducting interviews. And once they started to do this, they were so excited to talk to users. Like they didn't realize that we had this possibility to, just ask users these questions that can lead directly to different designs and to make it face to face and really to be able to empathize as well. So I think we started to do the qualitative interviews. Then we were introduced to this tool of Condense, which has really helped us to spread this qualitative research methods around the company, particularly with interviews, user interviews.
Yeah. So I understand that it was a lot of like walking the walk and doing it on the job, so to say. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it was a lot of us being present for those initial stages, for the first interview, for basically what we do is whenever there's a research question and we know that we want to speak to users, like it makes sense to speak to users in this scenario, we will set up a project in Condense, and we use the template feature to be able to collectively, whoever is in the research team, which includes perhaps one researcher and like a PM and a designer typically, sometimes a developer as well. And we go through all of the details of the research brief and the questions that we want to ask and kind of notes and tips to keep in mind during the interview. Then when we go into an interview, everybody has this project pulled up in front of them. So of course, always our primary focus is to pay attention to the person that we are interviewing and to listen very deeply and very carefully to them. But it really helps to have this shared document, the shared space where we're all kind of following along, and we know at what point we are in an interview. We usually have one interviewer who is just purely focused on listening and responding to the interviewee. And then we have one person taking very meticulous notes. And then sometimes if we have the capacity, we will also have another person listening in. Perhaps the PM wants to catch an interview or two and hear for themselves what the users are saying. So they will be instructed to wait until the end of the interview if they have any follow-up questions, but they'll often jot down some of their notes as well into that shared project. And then after we have the shared artifact, every 2 or 3 interviews or so, I would say, we do a quick kind of tagging session and noting of what are some of those themes and patterns that are emerging in the data already that we see. So we're doing a little bit of analysis as we go. And then we do a bigger analysis session as a group at the end as well. Yeah. And yeah, I can say more, but I'll let you.
No, that's perfect. I think this is super interesting to learn about this, how you effectively do that, and also in the details. And one thing that I find very interesting is that you do these review sessions after 2 or 3 interviews where we kind of bring it together. One question that I get a lot is how do you keep up with all of the tags? They may go wild and it will all become unmanageable. But if you have these kind of merging sessions once in a while, you can kind of see through all of the mess and kind of bring that together. Really cool. So yeah, you start together, they find the project together, you do the note taking together, you have these batches of interviews, you do this tagging. What comes next? You mentioned that you have a larger analysis session then?
Yeah, we have a larger analysis session. So there's a little bit more research oversight, I would say, during the actual tagging process. This is something that takes a little bit longer to teach non-research stakeholders of how to really look for those themes or patterns and how to tag that qualitative data. But after like several projects or studies, people start to get the hang of it. So we usually do this in a group, like usually at least 2 people, and sometimes more, because I think it's kind of a very, it helps to have at least 2 people's eyes on the same data, because you can notice different patterns. You can kind of discuss or dispute the data and what it means, and reach a kind of consensus. Also, people are really in the trenches, right? The stakeholders are involved in all of these steps, so they really like understand everything that goes into the research process, and how we're really coming up with these insights or unfurnishing these insights. Then once we've got all of the data tagged, the synthesis function is great because it does this automatic clustering for you, affinity diagram. So you can search by the tag, you can search by specific segments or demographics, and then you start to see these clusters, and then we start to develop the insights and the conclusion from the research. But in general, now Condensus has become our repository for qualitative interviews, and it really helps like to be able to publish the findings, to be able to show people all of the projects we've done, for them to be able to go back and reference the data themselves, to see the quotes for themselves. So it's just made this whole process of qualitative research and conducting interviews much more transparent to people throughout the company. How it works, how it's systematic, how we are able to develop these insights, and even if it's a small number of users that we've interviewed, the fact that there are these patterns of experiences that emerge across users or across projects is what really starts to resonate with stakeholders.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned is super interesting to me, like you said it, your colleagues saw that this is a systematic process, you could say. So then coming back to this topic of having heavy data science, or strong data science team in the company, how did that help in a way?
Did it help to have a data team already?
No, how did it help that others saw that it was a systematic process?
Yeah, definitely. It helps so much to show this, to have these processes in place. I mean, for the sake of organization, for the sake of people having confidence in the data, for people then later being able to go through this process themselves and to conduct research themselves. So we always go through these steps of, the research brief, the template, everybody aligning on this and having this shared artifact that we're working on throughout the entire project. And this whole every step of the process. So I think this it conveyed this validity, this scientific rigor, right? That there are these key steps or processes that we go through each time, that insights come when these patterns are appearing across many different users.
Yeah. Cool. And then I can imagine this is also part of the evangelization process. I think there's one question that I just saw here, which fits with that. So what kind of taxonomy are you using for the tagging? Is that set up front, or do you define it on the way, and are stakeholders allowed to create their own tags? How does it work?
Good question. We have some kind of overarching ones that maybe are more of our go-to tags, like pain points, motivations, usability issues, these kinds of things. But also when we're doing this batch analysis after a few interviews, we are working from the data itself and saying, okay, what are those themes that are popping up? What are those things that are coming up across multiple users? Not just, preferences or opinions, but kind of these deeper underlying reasonings, desires, motivations and we start to come up with themes around that. So a lot of the time we'll have specific tags that are relevant to that study and to that question that we're trying to answer. But then we have some that we're building across multiple studies as well.
Yeah. Cool. There are more questions which we'll touch on later, but I want to take a few more minutes to talk about democratization of research, and we'll talk about this today. Maybe, and you've introduced that already, so maybe tell us about your attitude towards that. What do you think about it in general?
Yeah, I found this talk this morning great by Jeanette Pucella about democracy or tyranny and UX research, and I think she had a lot of really valid points that democratization of UX research has become this kind of trend, but maybe it's possible to go too far as well in assuring quality of the research and just expertise and experience in this area. So we address this in a number of ways, right? So we are these enablers or coaches for research. So we are working with stakeholders to develop that research brief to really understand what is their research question, which method makes most sense to apply, and then if they are writing a script for usability tests or for a guided interview, we're reviewing that beforehand to check that it's not leading and no leading questions, but it really will answer the underlying research question that they want to answer. We've done several training sessions on how to conduct qualitative interviews. Also, just by virtue of participating in these qualitative interview studies, people are getting these kind of on-the-job training in tagging and analysis because we're working with them and showing them the process, even up on a screen or on a shared screen. So that's how they start to get the hang of this a little bit. But there's a lot of, once you build trust, then there's a lot of back and forth, right? Can you check this script for me? Can you make sure that this looks good? Does this research, can you help me to develop to make sure I'm asking the right question or I'm using the right method? So it's a lot of QAing and a lot of training and just checking in with people to see how their research is going.
Yeah. That sounds like a really sensible approach to me, where you say, okay, you check in with the key points of the study to make sure that they are correct, and you also do this on-the-job training, which doesn't cost any additional time. Well, it does cost additional time. It's obviously you do some explanations and things like that, but you'll have real data first of all, and you're actually also progressing the project. So that sounds really reasonable.
Yeah, it's a win-win because we can't conduct all of the hands-on research ourselves, but we can help to make sure that the research is set up really well. Being in that first interview, either leading the interview by example or listening in and then giving feedback to the interviewer afterwards and kind of setting them up for success in that project. And then we've got people who are better trained to be able to do this kind of research going forward, and we can accomplish more research across the company, and if everyone is kind of or if we are developing more and more people who are able to do some of the research.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's also this idea of teaching people on the job, but then kind of letting them do more and more over time and giving them more freedom, so to say, or responsibility, whatever you want to call it, and by that scaling the possibilities. Cool. I think you touched upon it shortly before, but also this might fit in here quite well. So who are the people that you have in tagging and analysis on the entire project? From which functions, for example, do they come from?
Yeah, normally we work very closely with the designers, and we sit on the same UX team. So our UX team is designers, researchers, and content strategists. Designers tend to be our closest link to the crews or teams that are working on different parts of the product. So they're usually our go-to person, our main point of contact. But we also work very closely with the product managers. And our product managers are really invested in hearing from users and participating in research to the extent that they're able to. They're usually very busy, but they want to be able to sit in on an interview or two. They want to see those highlight reels. They're really curious to soak up this data and this information. And then sometimes we're able to grab some developers who want to participate in the research as well, in the interviews, and they are able to ask questions about the experience themselves, which is always really cool to have a developer join.
Yeah, making this a cross-functional aspect. Yeah. Cool. Perfect. So maybe as a last question, maybe you can share a bit about what are your goals in terms of research at Freeletics, any things that you're working on currently, or any things that you still see there's room for improvement. Maybe you can share a bit about that and how you're approaching that.
Yeah, it's exciting times at Freeletics. We're growing all the time, and we have really interesting problems to try to solve or tackle. Some of the bigger kind of discovery or strategic research that we're doing now is around what does holistic coaching mean. So we started off as body weight training, but we've always really acknowledged this connection between body and mind. Now we have audio sessions with mindset training. We have an accompanying nutrition app. So we're figuring out how can we really integrate this to provide a really holistic lifestyle fitness coaching experience. Also, we're trying to help people to establish a fitness routine and to work out, oftentimes by themselves in their house. So there's a really high barrier to this kind of behavior or behavior change. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of reasons that people might not feel motivated. So this is from a psychological perspective and a behavior change perspective. How can we create a development system that celebrates people's achievements and helps them to see their progress and helps them to develop this routine and make this routine stick over the long term.
Yeah. Cool. Very, very interesting. And some of the toughest challenges in psychology in general also. Cool. With that, I think we can open it up for the Q&A. So I invite anyone who wants to share their video and audio to do that now. We have several questions in the chat which we can touch upon, but also feel free to join the session and make this more interactive. I'll give people to do that now, but we'll touch upon the questions first. So let me.
The first question was about the fintech in Brazil. It wasn't Nubank. Nubank is amazing though. I really love them, but it's called Banco Mare that I worked with. So started in the Mare favela in Rio, and they do a lot of co-designing, participatory designing with people from these unbanked favelas. So if you haven't heard of Banco Mare, check them out. The Nubank is a really incredible company to follow as well.
So next question I think was from Emily, and she asked, which tools have you been capturing? What does it say in the
So good question. I mean, in terms of video and audio, we use a lot of different tools. If we're using user testing, we always have those videos to analyze. If we're doing interviews, we ask for permission to record and again have videos, or we can do audio as well if people are more comfortable with that. We use SurveyMonkey for most of our surveys. We are using what's it called? Optimal Sort for card sorting. And Condensed for qualitative interview note taking. So these are the ones that are coming to mind first, but we've got a mix of audio, visual, and text data.
I think you have already probably answered the next question. Do I understand correctly that we use comments collectively during the interview to take notes and share them directly?
Yeah, so the whole thing is totally transparent, that they see, everybody sees this document, this shared document, and the notes as they're being typed during the interview.
As I said, we'll have a demo session right after this in 10 minutes or so on what's going to demo this in comments and how this works. So I think the questions from Fabian and Raphael have been answered during the interview about the taxonomy. If you feel like this hasn't been answered properly or you have any follow-up questions, please share them now.
Yeah, we pretty much covered those ones. There's a lot of oversight in the creation of the tags, for sure, to make sure that people are tagging correctly. I think this is a hard skill to really learn. But we have both projects that study specific and more global tags that we use.
Okay, so Fabian is asking about the clustering function, which sample sizes work well. It's a small sample that you use it with.
So we use this, so it's kind of this automatic function, this synthesis function in Condense. So it works for any of our tags. So even if we have a really small sample size, a handful of users, we wouldn't necessarily filter by demographic or segment. In that case, we would just look across those 5 participants and cluster all of the tags automatically. So we can see what are the main themes that have come up. If we use the tag for a pain point, then it automatically shows all those pain points and just makes the analysis process a lot more efficient, a lot smoother to be able to go through that.
Yeah. And maybe for clarification, so comments does not apply any tags automatically. So it's a user who's applying the tags and also using the filtering and sorting possibilities to get the information. I think Emily's question is also covered. Nina's question also. So maybe Alessandro is asking about the relation between product manager and UX researcher.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think that's I don't know. For me, it was new to develop these relationships at Freeletics. There's this very kind of business objective mindset or drive. Especially at Freeletics, we're working on a lot of projects around monetization, and then this UX research perspective about, well, what are the users actually saying? It's a relationship that really takes a lot of nurturing and developing a mutual trust over time, I think, because they're often very different perspectives on the product, or PMs will sometimes have really strong ideas or that they want to pursue, or they'll be tempted to kind of cherry pick from the data certain things that will back up these ideas. But I think by trying to really see the PM as someone, your user as well, right? This came up in a talk earlier in the conference too, to really take time to listen to them and to their needs and to their worries and concerns. Why do they feel so strongly about this particular option, and really try to get at the heart of that and try to define this research question that's going to help them as much as possible, and then having them participate in these different steps as much as they want to, in defining the brief and participating in the interviews, and then over the course of doing these projects together, and building on the insights across studies, they become a really key ally. That's some of the people that I'm working with the most. Also, like in terms of what the PM was doing for the researcher, right, and how they're helping us. I think that's really key too, because they're the ones who are able to actually act on the insights and to say, okay, this is the pain point that was like most salient for our users, or that could have the biggest impact for our product and for alleviating this pain point. So they're so crucial for taking these insights and acting on them and figuring out the next steps and implementing this with their crew.
Which I imagine is also an important aspect for the researcher. So you see the impact of your work and you see that things are actually happening based on the findings that you come up with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Nicola has a question. So what impact has the current context of COVID-19 had on your collaboration and democratizing research?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I mean, Freeletics is all about company culture, and they really pride themselves on the culture. It's also a German company, so kind of that physical presence is always something that was important, very important for the company. And it is an amazing office to work in for sure. And then we had to very drastically transition to fully remote working, and it was almost seamless, I would say. I was really impressed by how quickly and sort of effortlessly we were able to transition to this remote style of working. I mean, we did have to establish some rules about not having meetings take up the entire day, giving people more breaks because they're just seated in one space and staring at the computer all day instead of maybe interacting in person. So we did have to find some fixes. And then for the research side though, I'm lucky that I already had these relationships with my crews and my stakeholders. So I've still been able to run workshops, brainstorming ideation sessions, setting up research or giving feedback on a research design, developing the briefs. I think it would be a lot harder for people who are onboarding now, and we do have people who are onboarding remotely to try to develop these relationships entirely remotely. But we do have a lot of processes and tools in place now that help to facilitate that.
Cool. Next question, I think, is from Catherine. She's asking, is there a way to research people's long-term behavior?
Yeah, this is a super interesting question from a research perspective. I mean, this is ultimately what we're trying to do, is to make this like a lifestyle, a long-term habit to be fit for life. We don't want to sell some kind of quick fix, or if you do this for a few weeks, then you're going to be in amazing shape. We don't want it to just be kind of a fad. We really want this to become integrated into people's routines and lifestyles, and to make it work for them. So we have all these different adaptive features to customize a workout. You can make it shorter, only 15 minutes. The whole idea is that you can do it anytime, anywhere, no equipment, 2 meter by 2 meter space, trying to minimize all of these barriers as much as possible. In terms of long-term integration and behavior and how we research that, we do have a research panel of kind of trusted users who have given us really great feedback, and so we'll check in with them every so often. We have a beta program of people that we release our new features to. We do some annual type of research, so we do an annual survey on motivation and fitness behavior. And we just recently completed our first ever diary study at the company. So for 30 days, we followed 19 participants as they were starting their Freeletics journey. And we're really able to see over the course of these 30 days, what are the highs, what are the lows, when do they drop off, what works for them, and then we follow up with them later to see, are they still training with the app even after the study? So those are some of the ways we research that.
Yeah, nice. Fabian has a follow-up question on the discovery topics that you mentioned earlier, like holistic coaching. How do you make sure that this doesn't get too inspirational and so it's actionable?
Yeah, I think this is like a skill we're always honing as researchers. We tend to kind of like overshare a lot of information or to think in these really meta or high levels. But I reference Nikki Anderson a lot. I really love her work as a UX researcher, and she has some really good tips about how to write like concrete user insights and phrase it in a way like that's very like tangible. One sentence, we thought users would behave this way, but actually they behave this way. Back it up with a couple of quotes and link it to the studies that are relevant to that. So kind of having this boiling it down to these concrete like steps. We also include specific recommendations coming out of studies as well. Always with the goal of trying to make things like tangible and concrete and actionable.
Well, Fabian says she's working on this team.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's really good.
Oh, perfect. I'm afraid there's one more question that we couldn't touch upon, but time's up and we have to move on. So either we'll post it here in the chat or put it to Mining Networks and answer it there. Thank you so much, Kayla. It was super insightful.
Yeah, thank you.
We try to make the recording available for those who can see everything and share this on Mining Networks as well. Other than that, maybe Kayla, what is the way to reach you if there are follow-up questions? Twitter, LinkedIn, anything?
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. And we'll share that as well. Thank you for everyone who joined. As I said, we're now moving over to the exhibition space, to the comments group, and I'll share more about how you can use comments for real-time collaboration, research analysis, and comments. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.